Good day, ma'am. This is Nirfaida Asirako from BS Ed English 1B. For today's video, I should going to explain to you the contents of Week 6 module in Linguistics 2. Okay. Functions of Language by Michael Halliday. The first one we have instrumental. The instrumental function of language refers to when language is used to fulfill a need, such as requiring food, drink, or comfort. Phrases such as I want, can I have, and I need are all examples of instrumental language. Next, we have regulatory. When a speaker commands or persuades or requests something from someone else, this is known as regulatory language function. In addition, regulatory language controls the listener's behavior, which is the speakers adopt a commanding tone. Then we have interactional. This function is how we form relationships with others as it encompasses the communicative use of language. It is how we relay our thoughts and emotions, strengthening bonds with those around us. Next, we have personal. This function defines how we refer to ourselves and express our personal opinions, our identity, and our feelings. A child may communicate their opinions and emotions in a simplistic way, using phrases like me good or me happy, as well as expressing personal opinions and emotions. The personal function of language also encompasses how we use language to learn more about our surroundings by requesting information about it. Then we have informative. Similar to heuristic and personal functions, this representational language occurs when we request information. However, it differs from heuristic and personal functions, as it also refers to when relay information. In other words, it describes the exchange of information between two or more people. For example, questions like, what's that? And what does that do? Are representational. If this question is answered, it leads to a exchange of informational. So next, I should going to explain the theories on the origin of languages. The first one we have bow or wow or cocoa theory. The bow wow theory, the idea that speech are those from people imitating the sounds that things make. Bow wow mo ba, etc. Not likely since very few things we talk about have characteristic sounds associated with them, and very few of our words sounds anything at all like what they mean. Next we have poo-poo theory. The idea that speech comes from automatic vocal responses to pain, fear, surprise, or other emotions. A laugh is a shriek, a gasp, but plenty of animals make these kinds of sounds too, and they didn't end up with language. Then we have ding dong theory. The ding dong theory, this idea that speech reflects some mystical resonance or harmony that connected with things in the world. Next, we have the yo-yo theory. The yo-yo theory, the idea that speech started within the rhythmic chants and grunts people use to coordinate their physical actions when they work together. Then we have the Lala theory of sing-song theory. The idea that speech emerged from the sounds of inspired playfulness, love, poetic sensitivity, and song. This is lovely and no more or less likely than any of the others. Next, we have the Tata theory. The idea of the origin of language is the use of tongue and mouth gestures to mimic manual gestures. Next, we have the divine source. The divine origin is the conjecture that human language originated as a gift from God. On the other hand, we have also the oral gesture source. It suggests that the evolution of sounds involves a connection between physical gestures and orally produced sounds. Most of our physical gestures are means of communication. Even with the ability of speech, we frequently use our hands, face, and body to express certain emotion and intentions. Next, we have the glossogenetics. When this human could stand on their two legs, their larynx and speech organ behind Adam's apple in the human throat change in a way to allow humans to produce vowel and consonant sounds in human language. Human language developed as a result of this evolutionary change. Lastly, we have the physiological adaptation, or the physiological adaptation is an internal body process to regulate and maintain homeostasis for an organism to survive in the environment in which it exists. Examples include temperature regulation, release of toxins or poisons, and the releasing anti-freeze to anti-freeze proteins to avoid freezing in cold environments, and the release of nectar to attract prey. Next, I am going to explain the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis states that the grammatical and more verbal structure of a person's language influences how they perceive the world. It emphasizes that language either determines or influences one's thoughts. Next, I should describe the following terms. The first one is the semiotics. Semiotics is the study of science processes, which are the activity, conduct, or process that involves signs, where a sign is defined as anything that communicates something, usually called a meaning, to the science interpret, to the science interpreter. Second, we have the icon. An icon has a physical resemblance to the signified, the thing or being represented. A photograph is a good example as it certainly resembles whatever it depicts. Then we have the symbol. A symbol has no resemblance between the signifier and the signified. The connection between them must be culturally learned. Numbers and alphabets are good examples of it. Next, we have the index. An index shows evidence of what's being represented. A good example is using an image of smoke to indicate the fire. Next, we have the ethnopoetics. Ethnopoetics is a method of recording text versions of oral poetry or narrative performances that uses poetic lines, verses, and stanzas to capture the formal poetic performance elements which would otherwise be lost in the written text. On the last part of this video, I am going to differentiate the American Sign Language, or the ASL, and the Filipino Sign Language, or the FSL, which is Asians genetically have smaller hands compared to Americans. This also holds true as regards differences in the height and build. So, since a Filipino people hand is slightly smaller, touching all the fingers on the top of the thumb would not be clearly distinguished when viewed from at least 10 feet away. The hand would be mistaken from the letter O, which also touches the thumb. The solution would be detaching all the fingers from the thumb in order to distinctly see the letter E.